All right, well, I would like to bring to order this evening's meeting of the Planning Board. First, we're going to start by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so our first order of business tonight is, what is the official wording, Deb?
Election of officers.
Okay, thank you, election of officers. So I'll start by taking nominations for the chair.
Deb for chair.
Okay, any other nominations?
Second? No, not 10 yet. Never mind.
Do we have any other nominations for chair? Okay, then let's take a vote on Deb Rosini for chair. All in favor? All opposed? All right, passes 4-0. I'm going to go.
5. I counted
You
myself.
said, 5-0, okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over because I have no experience running a meeting, so I'm going to go ahead and turn
You
this
do now.
over.
Okay, continuing on, I'll open nominations for vice chair, and I'll nominate Rolf Madsen. Any other nominations? All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you, Rolf, for serving for another year. Last order of business is we need to elect our secretary, and or our administrative assistant, excuse me, and I will nominate Laura Lee Phillips to continue. Any other nominations? That's the juiciest job, you know. I'm just kidding. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 5-0. Laura Lee is our designate. Next is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of May 19th. Can I have a motion, please? Rolf Madsen moves to approve the minutes of the May 19th meeting. Is there a second? Second by Ms. DiPietro. All in favor, please raise your hand. 5-0. Okay, so next on,
Don't we have the 16th minutes too from last week?
we don't have the minutes from the 16th.
Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Oh, she did put them in there? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm looking at the agenda and not looking at the OneDrive. Okay, I accept a motion to approve the minutes of the 16th.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Madsen, seconded by Maggie Lynn. All in favor, please raise your hand. 5-0, the minutes of June
June
16th are approved.
It was
Okay.
a very exciting meeting.
There's a lot of conflict.
Shortest meeting we ever had. I don't even know if it went 5 minutes. So, okay. Let me get in the right spot here. There we go. All right, so next on the agenda is for GP-COG and to walk through their consultative scope for helping us implement the housing laws and into our land use code. So that's LD 427, 1829, I think, and 2173. One of them is missing off of there. Our guest is Shannon. What's your last name?
Chisholm.
Shannon Chisholm from GP-COG. She's a senior planner with GP-COG, is that correct?
That is correct, Deb.
Okay. And so she'll give us an overview of the work plan and any insights she's gotten. She's has a copy of our code. She has a copy of our our comprehensive plan, which has been passed. I think she might have the old comprehensive plan, not sure. And she has the summaries we worked on for a couple of the districts. But I chose not to continue those summaries once we knew we had a contract with GPCOG. So I think, did I cover all the goodies that you have, Shannon?
Yes, so, is this on? I can see the green button, but I can't hear myself
Yeah,
very
no,
well.
you're on. And, this should help us open a dialogue between us and GPCOG. Bring up your questions or concerns, but I'll give the floor over to Shannon.
Yes, thank you, Deb. So, due to...
Maybe we should all introduce ourselves, sorry. I'm Deb Bruzzini. Angie Cook.
Ralph Madsen.
I'm Maggie.
Catherine DePietro.
It's nice to meet you all. Happy to be here. So due to some technical issues, we won't be having a presentation today, but it was mostly just very short slides of me introducing myself and also introducing GPCOG. So for those of you who have not worked with GPCOG before, our acronym stands for the Greater Portland Council of Governments. We are a nonprofit organization that helps different municipalities throughout Cumberland with all of their planning needs, including zoning updates to meet different state legislation that has come down the line from Augusta. I myself have had some experience helping with the ordinance update for the city of Saco when LD 2003 came along. I'm sure many of you remember that. That's when ADUs became a permitted use on any lot with a single-family home. LD 1829 and LD 2173 both expand some ADU uses along with having some different dimensional requirements within growth zones and zones with access to public sewer and water. Gets a little bit confusing between the two, but for those in the audience tonight, I just wanted to say that LD 1829 was kind of the first bill that came along, and then LD 2173, which was passed this year, was kind of considered by the legislative branch as the fix-it bill. So there were a lot of things that, once the first bill came out, people were very confused about. And so the second bill was supposed to help answer some of those questions. So Ashley actually approached GPCOG, Ashley and Deb approached GPCOG with questions about how we could help both implement and see what kind of mitigation strategies might be available for, continuing to protect the character of Bridgton while also getting aligned with the state laws. So I'm happy to start just about anywhere, but that's kind of like the brief overview of some of the legislation that has brought me here today.
Okay, why don't you give us a little background on yourself and then...
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about myself. So my name is Shannon Chisholm. I am a graduate of the Muskie School of Public Education. I have a master's degree in policy, planning, and management with a concentration in urban planning. And the Muskie School is a part of the University of Southern Maine, so I've lived here for many years. I started my planning career with the city of Saco as their assistant city planner. I was there for almost 4 years. And then I was hired by the Greater Portland Council of Governments as their senior planner 1. And I've been doing actually a lot of work in this area lately, mostly in Harrison, but now excited to be here in Bridgton. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Do we want to go to, and Ashley, please guide us or redirect us if I go off somewhere we're not ready to go off to. Do we want to just go over the project scope right now? Yeah. So you'll see in your OneDrive, I think it says updated contract or something like that. Updated Bridgton contract. And if you, we can go through the whole thing, but the first, I don't know that that's necessary. The first 3 pages are all the legal stuff between the town and GPCOG. The scope of work starts on page 4. So Shannon, maybe you want to take us through that, and I guess I just asked the board could, if you have questions, just spit them out, I guess, unless you want to do it differently, Shannon.
No, I'd really appreciate this being an open dialogue, only because generally if I start consultant speaking at people, their eyes start to glaze over. So please stop me if at any point in time you have a question or thought. That's why I'm here. And workshops, they're a great space to just have a natural flow of communication. So,
Okay.
yes, so like I was saying, Ashley and Deb reached out to GPCOG. We met a week or 2 ago to discuss what kind of help Bridgton was looking for bringing their ordinance into compliance with state legislation. Deb and Ashley actually shared a very comprehensive document with me of some of the areas they had already identified as potentially needing to be changed.
So just for the board, that was the presentation you've seen at prior board meetings about LD 2173 and 1829.
Yes, so that was very helpful. When originally we put the scope together, we believed that we were going to have to do that work, but you guys had already taken the initiative to get that done. So we redrafted the scope of work to basically just go through the ordinance to make sure that nothing was missed in the first review. To confirm that we had all of the sections that did need to be edited. And then instead of making red line adjustments, so some of you may already be familiar with what a red line document is from your time here on the planning board, but it's basically going line by line through your ordinance and scratching out the wording that's being removed and then adding the new wording in, underlined in red. So that you know exactly what's being adopted into your ordinance. That's not part of the work that we're going to be doing. We're mostly just going to be confirming that all of the sections that need to be updated have been identified, confirming how they need to be updated to come into compliance. And then the major part of my work is actually going to be exploring how these changes are going to impact development outcomes within the growth areas and also within the areas with sewer and water that are not growth areas. And then looking into different mitigation tactics, whether that's buffering, whether that's design standards, whether that's a couple of other things that might still legally be allowed, and seeing how coupling those standards might either improve or change development outcomes for Bridgton. And then, of course, coming back with a nice big presentation to show you what all of that looks like.
Okay. All right, so one question you might have is who will do the red line? And Ashley has reached out to legal for cost information on both review and prepare the red line. So, and we have money set aside for that. So that's there. Any questions? Is this in line with what you all had hoped for? Comments?
My comment would be, it'd be nice if we could, you could go through the scope of work, the deliverables, and the explicit exclusions. I mean, I've read it, there's some people in this audience that have not, so we can give them a little bit of an idea of exactly what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be happy to go through this whole document if you want to, except
I'm
the
looking-
first 3 pages.
I'm
That
sorry,
really is
I'm
just
looking-
legalese.
The first part of the contract is a typical municipal contract that you do all the time,
Yes.
and it basically says the same thing. You do work, we need to pay you. So, but the scope of work tells us what you're gonna do, what we're paying for. So if you can just give us a brief synopsis of what it all is all about, that'd be nice.
Yes, of course. So some of the deliverables you're going to end up getting from GPCOG include recommendations for ordinance updates, just so, again, identifying and telling you what you need to do to come into compliance with the state. That will then be given up to your legislative team, your legal team, and they will then produce the red lines from that. Another thing that we will be producing is suggestions for compatible land use standards. So that could be changes in setbacks, that could be changes in buffering standards, that could be changes in, if you don't have designed standards, maybe applying design standards, things like that. And then, so that's another big piece. And then another deliverable, of course, is all of the presentation materials that will be created to kind of explain this both to the planning board, but also to the public. So people understand why these changes have to be made and why the planning board is also suggesting potentially like additional landscape standards in order to, make sure the development is still happening in a way that Bridgton would like to see it. We're also going to do one public workshop. This one is not the one, just so you know. But another deliverable under there says that we could do up to 3 public workshops, but we won't do more than 3, only.
And what will happen in the public workshops?
So I guess the next public workshop that I intend to have a large presentation at, in which we briefly go over the sections that are going to change, but mostly I'd like to dig into different development scenarios and kind of show what that's going to look like in visuals that are easy to understand.
And the public will be involved in that conversation.
Yes, they'd definitely be invited to be a part of that presentation. Generally, presentations like that also have a Q&A section. But if there is something else that you guys were interested in having for public involvement, I'd definitely love to hear it.
I think that's similar to what we did for the comp plan, if I remember correctly. I mean, that was a lot longer process, but, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, Deb.
No,
Would you
keep
like me
going.
to go over the explicit exclusions now?
Yes, please do.
Okay, perfect. So I think this gets kind of at the heart of your question of how the public's going to be involved in the process, is that beyond formal presentations and workshops, facilitation of public engagement beyond that will be something that GPCOG won't be handling. Of course, that's something that you could discuss as a planning board if you yourselves feel like there needs to be more. It's just something that's not in our contract currently. We also won't be drafting the warrants or articles or, just the normal meeting notices for our planning board workshops. And we won't be doing the statutory public hearing process. So that's all going to be covered by your staff.
Yes, whether it'll be at a public workshop or, one thing we talked about is whether it'll be at a public workshop or just a separate workshop. Once we get to the point where we're in agreement with, what the changes are and what we want, we're gonna wanna sit with the select board. And that may be, we may want the assistance of GPCOG during that if they have, questions. So, and I had something else in my head. And then the other stuff is really drafting the document, the detailed document, and putting it on the warrant. One thing we did talk about, and we brought it up I think at this meeting, is we're wanting to do just the necessary changes to implement the law, but also at the same time, not to create, not to have an unintended adverse consequences as a result of it, which is why GPCOG will look at some mitigation. The one thing we have talked about, and we talked about it at this board, is because, and of course the comp plan has been changed, but there's one area of the comp plan, and this isn't a final decision, but this is an area where we have said we might want to go to, is recall that the inner corridor, which now goes from around the electric company to Paris Farmers Union, except for those 3 lots that stick out. That's going to be expanded to take the place of the mixed-use corridor on 117. Okay, so what's now the mixed-use corridor on 117 will become the inner corridor. And the inner corridor has quite different setbacks and requirements versus, particularly on setbacks, versus the mixed-use corridor. So GPCOG is going to look at, if we were to integrate that immediately, how would that look? And then do we want to do that? So, and, that might, we'll get into the details later, but, that could end up, for instance, being a separate warrant article. That's a warrant article that's about implementation of the comp plan. What's important about that, if you remember, is that there's not public water or there's some public sewer, I think. There's not, and there's a little bit of public water, but the vast majority of that 117, right, Kathy, does not have public water and sewer.
That is true.
And may not for quite a while, but it is a growth area. So, it's the pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. So GPCOG will look at that one area too. Go ahead, Maggie.
The only thing that I think we had discussed that I don't see included in the scope of work is thinking about formatting changes and suggestions. I don't know if that is part of.
Those suggestions could probably be worked into there, I think, if
Just-
Shannon thinks she can.
Just as we're doing this updating work, thinking about ways to present this information within the code that makes it more accessible for folks, because currently our code is difficult to understand at best. And so where we can simplify, make things shorter, in your review, if you have suggestions, those would be.
Yeah, we don't need to,
Appreciated.
we may not make those format changes, but certainly as you go through it, if you're like, maybe this should be over here versus there,
If there's a suggestion, make the suggestion.
Yeah.
make
sort of
the suggestion, I mean,
Best practices
One-
in presenting.
and I don't know how formatting, I don't know if formatting requires a town vote, as long as you haven't made a substantive change, it may. But for instance, Shannon, one thing, I guess, that's been rolling around in my head that I've mentioned to some folks on the board is, right now, we have a dimensional table. And the dimension, I think I may have mentioned this when we were meeting, and the dimensional table right now probably has 6 or 8 footnotes. And, there's nothing in there obviously about whether you have public water or public sewer, whether you're a growth area or not. And I could envision that, there may be ways to make that table really work, or maybe it's 2 tables, but something's gonna have to change with that table. The other thing might be that instead of having a table with all the districts on it, is to have a list, of those, setback dimensional standards by district, just like we have other things by district. And then, for example, people can go to a district and they can see all the dimensional standards and the space and bulk standards and that sort of thing. So I do think that would be, if you could make those suggestions, that'd be great.
I'd be happy to. I've worked with towns and cities that have either put all of their dimensional requirements in one large chart, and you pop it open and it's all right there for you. And I've seen other communities that just had lists, just like you were talking about. So once I get into deep diving, I'll see, maybe what would work best for Bridgton.
Okay, great. Terrific. Do you want to go through the schedule?
Yeah, the schedule's pretty short, just because this is a pretty fast-paced project. So obviously I am here today, but I will also be here remotely on June 16th. Hopefully, that was last week. I was supposed to see you last week.
Right, July.
So I will be back for a planning board workshop in July in person, and I will be presenting the different development outcomes and recommendations. So it'll be a pretty quick turnaround, and basically after that July meeting, I think that would be the time where the board members would discuss, next steps of whether I'm coming back to speak also with the planning board and the select board at the same time, or how we would like to proceed from there.
Okay. Other questions for Shannon or comments? Boy, I had one and it just went.
You know what? Let me just add one more thing.
Go ahead.
Overall, the hope for this project is that we'll be able to wrap it up for you by the end of this year, if not the beginning of January.
Yeah, because we will, end of the year is best because we do have to get it, as you know, to the Housing Opportunity Program people who have, because we've gotten a grant from them for this work, specifically set aside for legal. So they have to actually review our document, to make sure we've incorporated what we were supposed to. So I'm just curious, Shannon, do you keep up with the Housing Opportunity Program folks?
I do.
Okay, so you keep up with Ben and Hillary.
Yes, I do. I'm actually part of their, so MOCA runs something called a continuum of practice. And so I'm a part of the housing and land use continuum of practice. I'm also a part of the Maine Association of Planners, LPC, which is a legislative advisory board that keeps up with most of the land use policies that are happening up at the state.
Okay,
So-
and if you don't know this, it's fine. Any idea when they're going to have the rules done?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, I'm hoping sooner rather than later, but it's been a slow process. So at the moment, they have not tipped their hand to give us an actual final deadline. But there has been a lot of different discussion about it, at least amongst the LPC, trying to dissect what all the different areas mean. And I think there are some significant changes between LD 1829 and LD 2173,
Yeah.
which are honestly pretty good changes. The density requirements outside of growth zones have changed dramatically, which I think is beneficial, especially if you want a transitional zone. So previously, in LD 1829, the dimensional requirements were almost the same outside of a growth zone as inside of a growth zone, as long as you had access to sewer and water.
Right.
Now, what they're saying is that the minimum lot size for a single family has to be 10,000 square feet instead of 5, and then for a duplex, it can be 20,000 square feet.
If they have public water and public sewer.
If they have public water and public sewer and they're outside of the growth zone. But past that, they've now kind of allowed you for that third unit to decide however much you want as a town, as a
Right.
community, needs to be applied.
And that's another thing we spoke about that Shannon will look at. So if you remember from our last workshop, if it's in a growth area and has public water and sewer, the first 4 units, 1,200 square feet per unit. But after that, it could change. It could be more. And it's the same case with if you have public water and sewer, and the first 2 lots are 10,000 square feet, that can be modified. And remember, in some cases, this might be so if the first 2 are 10,000 square feet, and that district normally has an 80,000 square foot lot size, the question is, do you go first 2 are 10,000 and then the next are all 80,000? So that's something that's one of the other things you'll present us with in terms of that.
Yes, and just to be clear too, it's 10,000 square feet for a single family, and it's 20,000
20
square
for the
feet
duplex.
for a duplex, but the duplex must be an attached duplex.
Right.
There's all this wording about attached versus detached that can get really confusing, but outside of the growth zone, to get that small density for the 2 first dwelling units, they have to be attached.
And this will also cover, well, you're going through a whole code, so there will probably be changes to subdivision that are going to come up.
Yes, the subdivision rules are a little interesting too. I know that for decades now, it's been, breaking a lot of land into 3 different lots of land within 5 years constitutes as a subdivision. Now it's 5 lots, or it's breaking an existing house into 5 units, or creating one new 5-unit structure. So they basically decided to move from 3 up to 5. for subdivision.
So actually, that's interesting, and I don't want to get too much into details, but I thought in the new law, what I read was, if you're dividing lots, it's still 3, but if you're got a single structure, it's 5.
You know what? I will at least
Okay.
digress that I will double check that.
Yeah.
I was rereading it before this meeting, but as everybody knows, like, it's
Well,
dense.
it's a little confusing because it's in 2 different parts of the law, so.
I think we should go with her interpretation of it.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Second it. Tell you guys to vote.
There was LD 1396 that didn't make it out of committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were several things that were
Yeah.
very similar that didn't make it out of committee, and many more that slipped through regarding parking, but we don't need to get into those tonight.
And that is one thing, obviously, that can be confusing, because also the authority for review is the code enforcement officer's going to have a little bit more authority than they do today. But not when you're splitting land, only when it's in a structure, so it's yeah, that's why you're helping us. So,
Yes.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. Do you need any more information from us other than the just passed comp plan and the existing ordinance?
No, I think that's exactly what I need. And if I have any, like clarifying questions, I'll probably reach out to Ashley and Deb just to be like, this is what I have inferred from your documents. Am I correct? So we'll be in communication.
Yeah. Kathy is an engineer who's also on the water board here, the Bridgton Water Board, and water supply. I mean, obviously, we have public water in certain places, but how much more we're going to have in the future is a big question. So.
It's an excellent skill trait to have for a planning board member, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Well,
are in the process of looking for additional water because growth zones are pretty limited until we have it.
That's also very true. So I know I mentioned that I've been working over the lake in Harrison, and they don't have any public sewer, and they have very limited public water as well. But I've done an entire presentation specifically for them for what this law does if you have a growth zone that doesn't have access to both water and sewer. That's something I'd be more than happy to share with this group, as it sounds like it will affect the mixed-use corridor that Deb was mentioning.
Yeah, it'll definitely affect the mixed-use corridor is going to, well, this is the intent of the comp plan, so using the word will change is a little premature at this point, but the intent is the mixed-use corridor on 117, which starts just outside of town and goes to, I think it goes to Pond Road, that will become the inner corridor, and that's fairly close to town. There's then a mixed-use corridor that's west of town that's just lots it's on 302, it's just lots that face 302. And it goes essentially from the split where Route 93 it goes off, all the way to the Freiburg line. Most of that, I believe, is recommended to become a district called, for lack of a better word, the rural corridor or rural residential corridor, something like that. So the intent, at least in the comp plan, is that the mixed-use corridor goes away.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
So one of the things is I need to familiarize myself with Bridgton's ordinances, but just kind of curious, do you guys already have a rate of growth ordinance in place? Are you interested in exploring that? Just kind of curious, because that's one of those things that I could look into, but I don't need to if that's something that.
I think a rate of growth ordinance would probably not something we want to chew on at this point in time. So I see Ashley shaking her head.
I mean, I would be,
And it would be, I mean, certainly it might be nice to have information. Go ahead, Meg.
I just think it would be nice to have information about what that means, and it might not be something that the community wants. I don't know if that's within the scope of this work, like,
Well-
we have a lot to do, but,
Certainly, if you want to describe it or send us some examples, that'd be great. But isn't it basically limits growth in a certain way?
It does. So, and these laws did affect what you can do with a rate of growth ordinance.
Okay.
So I definitely would have to look further into it. To my understanding, LD 1829 eliminated your ability to have a rate of growth ordinance in your growth area. And then LD 2173 brought it back with many, many caveats. So it would be something that I would very much have to look into, but there is something that I read before this meeting as I was refreshing my memory of the new laws.
I'd say let's get the things done that we have to get done first, and then maybe see where we are and just understand what, for me, if I were looking at it, and I'm not saying I would, because I think it would be interesting. I think it might split the town. But it would be interesting to know why people adopt it, or why towns adopt it, and what's the outcome as a result of adopting it, and does it go away? So, I mean, just like real basic, like few bullet points to understand, but I would say that's not the priority.
I
That's good
think
to know.
for me, it falls in the scope of work under, sorry. Like suggestions for land use standards and design and buffering, like it falls within that category. Obviously, in your growth zones, you want to allow growth, like that's where you're directing growth, and so I guess I'm curious in rural areas that are desired to be kept rural, how that would work. Or
How
not,
it would
not
work.
suggesting that we should adopt it, just wanting
Okay.
information.
That's kind of what I was thinking
Okay.
too, is that it would fall under that area of scope of work. But I just wanted to know whether that would be not something that you wanted me to explore. And I was fine either touching it or not touching it.
I think we just want to understand the basics.
Okay.
And so we know what that is. Certainly not something that, at this point, well, I'm just going to speak for myself. I think it would be very difficult to implement, so. But I think I agree with Maggie that it's worth at least understanding under the suggestion part.
Yeah, I agree with you, Madam Chair. You should just stay focused on what you're doing. I mean, whether you acknowledge it or not, I said this before, every time you guys make ordinances more restrictive, you have a de facto rate of growth ordinance. You're slowing down growth by making things more and more restrictive. I've heard this board before say that they're real interested in having affordable housing, but what you're saying now is, well, we want affordable housing, but let's look into a rate of growth.
That's not what I just want to clarify, these laws are implementing changes that make development easier and faster, right? Like that's the goal. It's how and where and I'm just interested in learning information.
I disagree. You can't say this makes it easier, but let's look at a rate of growth ordinance.
I'm
because
not
those
saying
all
we
go
should
together.
look at a rate of growth ordinance,
We're trying
it
to
should be
understand
included
it.
in,
And
I'm just trying to understand the options. I'm not suggesting that we're gonna be doing that and that it would never be in a growth area. I think one of the goals of the new comp plan is, and a desire of the community is keeping some rural character in how we do that. And I think this is a tool in the toolbox. It's not a suggestion that we're gonna implement it at all.
I think cluster zoning is a tool to do that. Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
All right, so Any last questions for Shannon? Ashley, do you want to add anything? Shannon, do you have any questions for us?
Just one more question.
Okay.
And mostly just because I still need to have time to familiarize myself with your ordinance, but do you already have conservation or cluster subdivisions in your ordinance?
We have cluster subdivision in our ordinance, we don't have conservation.
Okay.
And the cluster, of course, requires, if you want smaller lot size, it requires open space. And actually, you're welcome to stay, but when we're done with this section, we're going to review subdivision changes that focus around cluster housing. And so you're welcome to stay or you're welcome. I'm happy to give you my copy of the proposed changes, which are really to kind of clarify the lot sizes that could be possible and the amount of space, open space that needs to be designated.
I might stay for that.
Okay.
I don't want to steal your paper.
Is there,
Oh, okay.
do you have a copy of the changes?
Yes, I was just given one.
Okay, great.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions. Could I just-
Sure, go right ahead. Remember to name and address.
Good evening, my name is Paul Skinner, I'm a landowner in Bridgton, Pleasant Mountain and Little Mountain, 7 Lot 4A, Mount 12 Lot 5. Thank you for coming tonight and going over your proposal. My first question, is the proposal executed? Have we signed a contract? Is that a done deal?
Yes,
Okay.
we have.
That changes a lot of what I have to talk about. I think it's a good idea to do this in general. My first preference would be to not implement it at all. Just kick it out of the code. It's state law. Leave it out. Put in a paragraph, refer to it. Town of Bridgeton fully compliant. Where there's a conflict, where there's a conflict between this ordinance and state law, what's the wording you use? Controls. For densities and uses beyond that, refer to the code rules. Done. I know you gotta go in and tweak it in a few places, but from what I've seen and the way this has been produced, no offense to anybody in the room, I don't think any of us had anything to do with it. They've been fiddling with it all the way through. And I watched that presentation on February 19th. I watched it twice and I was blown away, confused, disappointed.
I think for me, speaking as a board member, and yes, we're not going to go in that direction, obviously, but for me, or we're not currently going in that direction, for me, I think it would lead to a lot of confusion because the laws get changed all the time. We'll have to keep referring to that and know that we have conflicts. It won't be obvious that there are. The other thing is that without cleanly specifying it in the ordinance or spelling it out, and others are welcome to chime in. I think we get into some very laborious discussions with applicants that then turn into appeals and legal issues because the applicant's interpretation of state law may be different than the board's interpretation of state law. And I guess the one other reason is that there are parts of town where the housing bill that's going to be implemented, specifically in some of the growth areas, is going to be a monumental difference in density and lot size, and it's important to understand what that impact is going to be, which they're going to help us with, knowing the town, and whether we should implement some levers to, conserve what the townspeople have said they wanted. So, and I just don't see us doing that with a reference to state law. My biggest concern is I can definitely see us going down a legal rat hole, for sure.
Well, I just feel that there's so many other state laws that you don't put in the code. Subdivision law is not in there, a lot of forestry law, a lot of DEP law. I mean, Augusta decided this was a, one size fits all. And they took that authority away from you to manage the town based on what the comp plan says and what the community wants. We all know that. Why can't it just be reference? It'll be a flow chart, it's a building permit. And when somebody pulls a building permit, if they do something on their property, they have to know the law. Any developer that's going to put in a triplex or a quadplex or do affordable housing is going to know the law, or they're going to have an engineering firm to help them.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of stated my reasons. I don't know if
So,
anybody else
anyway,
wants to
we've
speak up.
executed a contract. I wanted to get you before we did that, but it doesn't mean we can't redefine the scope and work on enhancing, spend the time on enhancing the code, because I think this is going to continue to change. They've let us, given us no reason to believe that they're not going to keep fiddling it with a fix the bill, fix the bill, fix the bill. Now, what happens if the winds in Augusta change and they gut it or repeal it? You've done all this work, you've trashed your code, and now you have to start the process over again or leave it.
Yeah, not necessarily. If it's done in the right way, then that works for the town, there would be no reason to repeal it. Anyway, Ashley would like to say something.
Okay.
So
And
I was
then-
just going to add a little bit
Go-
just to
go ahead.
clarify.
Go up to the mic, Ashley. And then we need to move on.
Okay. Yeah, so just to make this very
Sir, were you
brief.
finished? Yeah,
Paul, were you finished?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, but just to be very brief, GPCOG's role is not necessarily implementing the law for us or incorporating the law. So their scope is very different from what we're doing on that level. So I just want to clarify, they're really helping us more with understanding how we can implement what's been put in front of us in a way that maintains the desires of the community. So that's really the basis of that contract. Beyond that, we also receive grant funding to implement this through legal services. So we are already underway with that and have a contract with the state. So, I appreciate the feedback, and I think we've vetted this before this meeting, and it has been part of workshops previously. So, I think the planning board has the intention to implement this in the most reasonable and mindful way possible to meet both the needs of the community, the developers, but I think everybody here, including myself, are very open to feedback, and throughout this whole process would really appreciate, your continued attendance at meetings and to engage with this process with GPCOG. But I just want to clarify the differences, because there is a difference between what GPCOG is doing for us and what we're doing on a legal level. So that was the main point I wanted to make.
Okay.
And just for the record, I'm fully supportive of hiring it out. I thought it was too much work for you folks, as Maggie pointed out. She has a day job, many of you do, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot more than the meeting. I know you guys, I can imagine how many hours would be spent during the week. So fully supportive on hiring it out if you don't kick it out of the code completely. So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. I know you drive a long way to get here, so I appreciate it. Anything else before we move to subdivision? Okay, in that case, the next item on the agenda is to review the subdivision regulations draft. It says amendment. It's not an amendment yet, it's a draft.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm going to go sit in the audience.
Okay, great. So just for some background for folks in the audience and on TV, the board designated two of us, Erica and myself, to work on cluster housing. And so we did that. Erica and I came back to the board with some line item recommendations. The board agreed with those recommendations. We got some input from Mr. Lopez. And so what's been done here, and I don't know that every recommendation has been put in, but In fact, there are a couple that weren't put in, but I think if we need to, we can get to those later. So, so the required changes, the way this is laid out is, the revisions are numbered. There's a very short explanation of what and why. And then there's red line in the document. So you don't have the whole document, you just have the pieces of the document that change and some of the remainder of the wording in that section so that, you know, you have the context. There's pretty much the entire cluster housing section, more or less, are in there, okay? So I think also to follow up on Mr. Lopez's suggestions, one of them was, which we discussed, was a 25-foot setback within the subdivision if you have a single road coming in and the code already allows for that, if it's not a public road, which it wouldn't be when it is put in. The other thing that Mr. Lopez asked about is, there's a section in the code that says if you have 20 or more dwelling units, you need to require 2 entrances. And my job was to go speak with the fire chief to find out if that could work. And he said it could, but let me just, before we get going, well, when we get to that section, because I don't know if you have the email he sent me, I will read that email to everybody. It's quite short, but basically he's okay with it. I sent him very close to what the red line is in here. And, you know, he essentially has to be consultant because he's the authority with jurisdiction or whatever. So, I thought we'd just go through these page by page, if that makes sense for you guys and public to come up when they want to speak on a change or if they have other suggestions. Does that work for everybody? Okay. So, the first section is on applicability. The red is that in there was actually a change that was red line into the LD 2003 changes, and somehow it did not get in there, probably because subdivision doesn't go to the voters. Subdivision is under the authority of the board, so that this document is pulled out when there's a vote, and I think we were supposed to go back and put in this statement, and we never did, so, which is my bad. So,
This is nitty-gritty, but does the beginning July 1st, 2018 then
Yeah.
need to change?
right, so basically,
And then should we just change because now the division of an existing structure, it is 5. Is that correct?
yeah,
Maybe we just change all of that? No?
yeah, because does it say into 3?
Or just flag it for updating?
It's gonna be 5, so,
For an existing structure.
It says new or existing.
new or existing structures, it says. So I guess, you might know this off the top of your head, Shannon, without me looking things up, but the division of a structure into 5 falling under subdivision review, is that a new structure or new and existing?
So I will have to check back to make sure that it includes both new and existing. Pretty sure it does include existing at the very least. I'll just have to check about the new. But also, if it's split into 5 new units, I'm pretty sure that's when subdivision begins again. So it would be like 4 or less would be exempt from subdivision.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
again, let me check on it and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
But that's my initial reading of the law.
And this will go to our legal team. So if I just, to save you some time,
I'm pretty
I
sure
will,
it's 4 and under, only because that was kind of like, the 4 was like the magic number that
Okay.
like LD 2173 was like after 4, then everything goes back to home
Okay.
rule.
we'll change it to 4 and see what our legal team says.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one, no pre-clearing of land prior to review. We did want to implement this, but I think, and in your electronic copy, you can see Ashley's comment. I think there's an issue with this. So, Ashley, maybe you want to just explain your
So
comment.
what's the issue?
How are we gonna balance the fact that somebody might clear their land and 3 years later they decide they want a subdivision? Does it have to have some sort of time consideration? Go ahead, Paul.
So Paul Skinner again. So I'm concerned about that particular one because, first of all, what's the definition of clearing? So, I own a lot of woodlots, 6 or 8 of them in town, totaling 250 acres or so, and I log them from time to time. I have no plan to do anything, but when I do, what does that mean? And does that become a problem later? And I'm not talking about digging out stumps. I'm just talking about logging it. And sometimes when you're logging a piece of property, you get into stand of dead pine. Even though your prescription might say takes
Right.
16 and 18 inch, they end up taking it all, and you have a 2 acre or 3 acre opening. That's not done on purpose. That's done because the dead pine won't stand up, and it's a hazard, and it's dead.
Yeah.
So I guess my thought was, can you strike that and address it with buffering? So if you specify, I don't know what I didn't study the buffering before I got here. So if you have buffering requirements and setbacks and things like that in your clustering and your subdivision, can you just make that more strict? So if somebody intentionally goes in and really hits a piece hard right to the edges, they're going to have to deal with that when they go through sub-D because they're going to have to make sure they meet the buffering.
Yeah, thank you. Ashley, would you like to explain what your thought was?
Yeah, I think you guys are kind of touching on it, but I think at the heart of my concern really is that it needs more clarification. I think at a minimum, it needs to be a lot more clear what we're saying, because I think to Paul's point, you could buy land and maybe not have the initial intention of developing it in that way. So how are we differentiating between intent and the outcome? I think that there's a lot of assumption there when we're with that statement. So I don't know what the way to mitigate that is, but I think I'm pointing out that that's really open-ended. We're kind of putting a stamp on something that it's not clear, I think, how we would enforce that, how we would really understand what a developer's intention was when they first purchased the land. So are we going to say you can't do something, like, are we gonna penalize them or say you can't develop it because you cleared trees prior to knowing what you're gonna do with the land? Or
Does a-
whatever the scenario might be.
Does a homeowner have to pull a permit to log their land?
I think so, depends on what it is, right?
Depends on how it's defined.
File a notice with the forestry service.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
it
at
goes
a
through
minimum,
the-
I'm just saying, I think it needs to be spelled out more clearly or better better laid out in what we're stating.
Madam Chair, Mark Lopez, 438 Commons Drive. You already have in your ordinance now a timber liquidation clause in the subdivision, and I was just trying to look it up, I couldn't find it, but you already have that in your ordinance, that's a consideration. If someone comes in and we clear cut a lot right now, and then bring a subdivision plan in, you guys have the ability to look at that in your existing ordinance.
So, that's a good point.
Thank you.
And I'm familiar, so I guess,
Get the
and I'm
recording.
familiar with that, but one of the struggles, maybe struggles is not the right word, but the land subject to liquidation harvesting, which is a paragraph this long, and it's item U, which is a state standard, and it gives a bunch of state references. There, and Brenda and I talked about this. There's nothing in here, and there's nothing in the requirements for submission that the board can say, okay, it was done properly, other than if what Brenda said is, I may have the exact authority wrong, but that you can get a certification from, I don't know, if it's not necessarily an arborist, but you can get a certification from a licensed person that can basically avow that that hasn't happened. So that's an option, but obviously the other way is for the board to ask the applicant to provide proof, which might require them to do that anyway. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mark, because, you know, in the past, we really haven't gotten any proof other than the applicant's agent saying it hasn't been harvested. But there's no certification of that or anything like that. I mean, do you have any, and the reason I was hesitant to suggest that to the board, the certification, is obviously that's going to be an extra step required by the owner to go and, you know, basically avow that, because it's a pretty.
What do other communities do?
I think it's worthy.
Other communities probably, some ask for the certification.
In a lot of other communities, they refer to the state statute with, liquidation harvesting. But I mean, there's a difference, the ballpoint between, harvesting some timber and clearing that a lot. And I think you guys can tell when you go look at something, if you do a sidewalk, whether it's like harvested or clear cut.
Somebody clear cuts, it eliminates any of the buffering.
Potentially. It
Well,
may,
yeah, it does.
well, it may eliminate
Does,
buffering between lots in the subdivision.
logging,
but
do you
but they
notify
maintain
the
it around the
abutters for
perimeter,
logging?
I don't see an issue with that.
Well, we do have a section,
I have a question for Mark Huber.
go ahead.
Does the Forestry Service, when you have land harvested or clear cut or anything, do you have to notice abutters to that? No, you
No.
don't, okay, okay.
I mean, if we wanted to put in a statement similar to, so right now we have 25-foot buffers for all subdivisions except ones that are just, you split the land, maybe, and they're facing a public road, and that's 15. I've had one thought is we just ought to make them all 25, since the setbacks in most of the town in the rural neighborhood are 75 feet anyway. You're not gonna put a structure in there.
Right.
Still leaves you 50 feet of grass or whatever else you went. So that would be another thing. And we do have something in the site plan which basically, so the site plan has buffering requirements, well, the districts have buffering requirements within the district, but those don't apply for subdivision. So, but one of the things that's in the site plan is, I'm not gonna say it exactly, but if somebody comes in and wipes out everything, including the, the required buffer area, they're obligated to replenish that back to the way it was within X amount of time. So you could put something like that, which means if somebody cuts into the buffer, and say it's a 25-foot buffer, then they're gonna have to not just plant a few trees, they're gonna have to revegetate. I think the other reason I think some of us thought of this, myself included, was, but with item B, which is in the code, we could do that, the board could do that, is in some of these smaller subdivisions, we're not, we're giving a waiver for landscaping. But it seems like it would be more aesthetic in a lot of these if, and Maggie, I don't know if this is what you're gonna say, and I'm gonna stop talking after this, if there was some trees or vegetation between lots, which would be within this setback area. And I'm not talking about 25-foot buffers, I'm talking about something. Maggie, you were gonna say something.
Maybe this is just worthy of a little bit more research to see if there are examples out there, and just in a quick Google search, the town of Brunswick has, I don't know what the outcome was, but on March 30th of this year, their director of planning there's a memorandum about landscape preservation zoning text amendments, and included in it is language for discouraging land clearing prior to development and buffer areas. And Bridgton is not Brunswick, but again, maybe a helpful example of, it's very well written, of how it aligns with their comprehensive, but I just think it's worthy of maybe more research.
I mean, the other thing is,
Because I'm not sure the best.
I mean, I agree that, well, and before I agree on anything, comments from other people on the board.
I know.
What would you like to see?
Definitely some more clarification on that. And more clarification on clearing and, what was it, harvesting? And then you said sometimes when you go into harvest, you have to take down more because the white pines.
Take it all.
Right, so you want to have to take it all, and then at what point does one determine, oh, they did it on purpose, or they had to?
Yeah, see, that's the part that's the killer right there.
But you know what I'm saying, but like if he went in to harvest and he planned on only harvesting a certain type of wood, but then it's next to this pine, and as soon as he takes this one down, then the pine falls down, and then it becomes a safety issue for the people working there, at what point is it, not necessarily on purpose, but at what point is it because you have to, or,
I get it.
that would be my question.
Usually good harvesting practice too, if we get into something like that, and they're all dead, they know it's just as an act
Right.
Does anybody else on the board want to speak to this? I would suggest for now we strike that. And perhaps on B, and again, this is just a suggestion, where it says it must include a landscape plan that will show the preservation of existing trees, the replacement of trees and vegetation, graded contours, blah, 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 blah. That is a standard in addition to the perimeter buffer standard. So we could add some detail to that. I mean, right now, the other option is the board specifies to the applicant that in order to pass that standard, they're requiring leaving some existing trees. But I'm trying to make it clear for people before they come to the board so they're not revegetating. Go ahead, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you need to set a time frame on that too. I mean, you could have a woodlot that you cut, and then a couple of years you sell it to Angie, and she comes in thinking that she could divide it, and then you say, well, you can't because it was clear cut 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever the time frame is. I think you would need to set some type of a time frame on that, if you're gonna go that route.
Okay. All right, we can look into that.
I have one more that goes on.
Yeah, sure, go
I'll be
ahead.
really quick. So in the liquidation, there's a bunch of exemptions on it. One of them's less than 20 acres, so you can clear cut it. But the thing that I think about on the bigger woodlots, the case that I told you about, if you have a stand and need to take out that's 2, 3, 4, 5 acres, whatever, sometime in the future, if I sell the land to somebody, or I want to divide it myself, if the line happens to go through one of those sections, that's what I'm talking about. How do we deal with that? And maybe because there's no way you could have been able to tell way back when you logged it, you had a stand of stuff that had to come out. Now you want to put a line through the middle of that. I'm not talking around the perimeter.
Right.
I mean, the perimeter, nobody should be clear cutting to the perimeter unless they're putting in a field, but that happens. And you can do that. You can cut every stick on it.
Yeah.
Just like if it's a field that you're subdividing, there's no trees.
Yeah,
So maybe you address it with where you're going with the required.
the intent is really is aesthetically and also for abutters, and also, of course, the homes that are built, that there's some level of privacy and buffering, and aesthetically, it doesn't look like, you got your perimeter buffer and then it's a desert inside that type of, not a desert, but you know what I mean.
How do you handle that when it's a field?
Yeah.
You're still, the buffer specs require you to put it in.
Yeah, to Paul's point when we're talking about the field, the reality is, when you create a lot with 100 feet of frontage, and you want to have 15-foot buffers with a 50-foot building envelope, you don't have a lot of room for the house. I mean, if you put a 50-foot house on a 100-foot wide lot, and you have 15-foot buffers, you've got 10 feet on either side of the house that, if you follow the buffer regulations. I think it's more important to protect the buffer around the perimeter of other abutting properties. I mean, at the end of the day, the homeowner is gonna be the judge to say, okay, I like this or I don't like it, regardless of whether there's buffers. So, it creates some difficulty with that 100-foot lot, 25-foot side yard setbacks, 15-foot buffers. I mean, think about 10 feet, it's from me to Maggie. That's what you got on either side of the house, if you're gonna try to maintain a tree buffer.
And how do you know that whoever buys
Well,
a house in the subdivision
Right, it's not gonna cut
isn't
them
going
down.
to cut that out anyways, and then who's responsible for that? Do you go to the homeowner and say, you can't cut that?
All right, I think one change we could make that would be helpful would be to just have 25-foot perimeter buffer for all subdivisions, okay? And I see some nods there. I think that would be helpful. That gives another 10 feet of buffering.
I'm happy to email this around from the town of Brunswick. They have some interesting language about, like, saving 30% of trees over 10 inches DBH, which those are big trees.
Yeah, that's in
I
Naples.
think there's ways to maybe get specific that are not burdensome, that will, because I think the goal is to achieve the aesthetic vision and shade. And so.
Okay, well, send that around. For now, we'll make the change to have a 25-foot buffer, change where we allow 15-foot to 25, and then all subdivisions will have a 25-foot perimeter buffer, which is pretty common across every town I've looked at. There are towns with 50-foot perimeter buffers, but I think that might be, I'm not.
I also think this is an example of maybe where in a growth area it is different than, or in certain zones, like maybe there's specificity there, again, to not deter.
All right, why don't you send that
Density.
language some example language to the board. But what I'd like to do is if we are successful, send this document and any changes to the attorney to review. And we can also ask them about that, because what not that I'm saying I'm in a hurry, but, housing is an issue, and if we can agree on these changes and legal doesn't see any issues, then the next step is a public hearing, and after the hearing, it's our choice whether or not to adopt the amendments immediately into the document. I think I can double check on this, but I think it's also our choice whether to strike some of the things or add something based on public comment. What I don't know is, I don't think it would require another public hearing, but we probably, to be, for good public process, I would ask that we require one. So, okay, so let's go on to the next one. On roads, that's down at the bottom. And let me just read what the chief said. Okay. I didn't give him the exact language, but very similar. I refined it to include, what you see here is that we have to consult with the fire department and public works department. That may be only the fire department, I think. This is what and I also asked him if we needed the standard at all. He said, I would be okay with the proposed change in language, which is very similar to what's here, except it doesn't require us to consult with the fire chief. It's up to the AHJ, which is the authority having jurisdiction, which as concerns fire protection and subdivision safety, because we have a subdivision fire safety ordinance. It's up to the AHJ to determine that under NFPA 1, 2018 edition, Chapter 18.2.3.3, this edition is the one adopted by the town. So he's fine he's fine with the change in language. And I would strike Public Works, unless you all think different.
Nope, I'm fine with that.
And also in the first sentence, it should say may have one connection, not connection.
Yeah, the S has been struck, but it's hard to see because I didn't do the normal red line. I crossed it out. Does anybody have any comments on that?
What does the consultation look like? Is that included in the impact report? Like, would that suffice? Or would it be additional?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I could reword this that the fire department will state on their impact statement that one entrance is sufficient. I could do it that way too.
Whatever is easy or easy and clear from a process standpoint would be fine with me.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? Ashley, you have any thoughts? Ralph,
I'm good.
the way it is, or having it be in the impact statement?
Impact statement's better because we're used to the document.
Put it in the impact statement.
Then it's not more work.
It's
Right,
there,
it's-
that's what we look at.
Yeah.
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 Okay. The planning board will making this finding, I'll say something, I'll get the right words, but something like, in making this finding, the planning board must receive a non-objection on the fire department's impact statement, and must make I'll just say, must receive that on their impact statement. So so it would read, subdivisions containing 20 lots or units or more may have one connection with existing public roads or roads on an approved subdivision if the planning board finds that emergency vehicle access and traffic safety are not adversely impacted. In making this finding, the fire department will specify non-objection on the impact statement, or something to that degree. I'm sure legal will. Okay. And then leave the last, otherwise the subdivision will have at least two connections with existing public roads or roads on an approved subdivision. The next one is lot area for mobile homes. So this was something we overlooked when we implemented net buildable land. My reading of the law and communication with the Housing Opportunity Program says this is feasible, but obviously our lawyers will tell us if it's not. So it's really just making it the same as the others. Any comments on that?
Well, obviously, we're gonna get that covered, because I have doubts that you really can do that. That's a standard that's mandated by the state, specifically to stop communities from being exclusionary.
Yeah, my interpretation of the state law was that it's talking about areas, meaning zones. So in other words, you can't keep a mobile home park, and we're talking about mobile home parks, from being built, a mobile home has to be allowed every single every single zone where you allow residential homes, dwelling units. But the state law, in terms of what I interpreted, sounded to me like you couldn't put stricter requirements in an area in which you also have residential housing. So we'll have them check it. And if it's, and I don't know how long it will, we'll get a date from them. I'm hoping they turn this around. These are pretty simple changes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping they change it around within a couple of weeks, but I can't commit to that. Anybody have any comments? All right, moving on, then we have modifications to cluster housing.
Looks like just
And the change is, just so you can see everything, the change is not until you get to the part about roads. So I just, it says internal roads must be built to comply with the road design standards in section V5N. Because we allow non-conforming roads, although generally people don't ask for them, I thought it should say that. I thought it should be inclusive of that. People okay with that? Sure.
Paul Skinner. So with that, if you were to make changes to what's required on roads, So I know what it says now. I also know there's a, and maybe that's what the addition is for, I think it was the Public Works Director can reduce the requirement if he or she so chooses. I think that's the exception, right? Is that what?
Yeah,
added?
it basically, in the roads section, I can, non-conforming roads. Roads that do not conform to the design and construction standards in subsection N3 above, which lists
Yep.
A through I
Right.
requirements, may be permitted within a subdivision upon approval of the planning board after review by the Public Works Director.
Okay.
As long as the applicant stipulates on the final subdivision plan in each deed that it's served by a non-conforming road and is not intended that the road now at any future date will become a town road.
Yep. So if you were to potentially make changes to the requirements of a road, say for cluster housing, you relax the standard, this wouldn't need to change. It would change in one of these subsections, or maybe not need to change at all.
It would have to change,
May not need to
it
change.
would have to change in the design and construction
Okay.
standards for roads. And, I mean, that would be a longer lead time item because we'd have to go to Public Works and have them figure it out, and Brenda. Whether we would say, you don't need to do this for these things for cluster housing, probably not. What I've seen in other ordinances is they actually have what the road design must be for cluster housing, whatever that minimum is.
Okay. All right, so it
So-
wouldn't be.
Madam Chair, thank you. I think that making this change is a real good step in the right direction, preserving the rural character that you guys talk about wanting to preserve. To be able to do this, to go down to 20,000 square feet of net buildable land instead of 40, changes the economics on some of these developments so that you don't have to cut up every lot along the street front. You can make the decision to say, okay, now we can justify putting in some road because we can get higher density on this piece of property than we could under the 40,000 square feet. I commend the board for taking this step, and I think it would be very helpful in achieving your goals.
Thank you. So Mark's talking about the next section.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did I jump ahead?
No, that's fine. You're fine.
Trying to move
We're
the
moving
meeting
right
along.
along. You moved us right along. That's just fine.
Well, that's a good prelude.
There you go. And just to your point, Mark, you know, if you have one road going in, that's one cut in the buffer, which even if it's a small subdivision is really important, because if you have a 5-lot subdivision and you have 5 20-foot cuts for each lot, then you really only have, you know, 80 feet, 20 feet cleared, 80 feet, 20 feet cleared. It really does change what it looks like. Anyway, next, what would change is, you see the wording here for common open space? We've basically specified what the lot size may be decreased to, which was not specified before. So it was very amorphous. And then how much, you know, you can reduce it essentially to 20,000 square feet if you put aside 20,000 square feet per lot for common open space. And then, you know, we already have what common open space, what's required for that. And as we discussed, it could include land not suitable for development, as long as it complies with, you know, it's accessible to all lots, and it complies with items 2 through 8, which would have to anyway. That's almost redundant, but it's there. Any questions? So, a nice tiny little path up to a wetland with a bench for somebody to contemplate.
It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that if you could put a mobile home at 20,000 square feet, you should be able to put a regular house on 20,000 square feet.
next change, which I didn't put a number to, because I said to consider, we don't have definitions for central sewer and central water, and we talked about just eliminating those terms in the ordinance and basically specifying, and it's going to change anyway in some cases, and just specifying, specify what septic is required for the density that you want.
Why won't we use shared septic system?
I'd prefer to use, if we do that, community septic system, because shared can be two.
Two is what? Two is a number that's fine, by the way.
Doesn't work for me. I think you just end up with
Community seems to imply much larger.
not, the last application we had here, and it was Mr. Lopez is on South High Street. He's got 5 units tied to a community system, which we defined as central in the ordinance.
Yeah, I tried to tie the language back to the subsurface wastewater treatment rules, in which case it would be called multi-user.
Multi-use is just good as shared. It says the same thing.
It does, but it's found in the subsurface wastewater treatment rules, so they have a definition of it in there. So we don't have to come up with a definition.
What's the definition is?
More than one dwelling unit
Tied to,
tied to a, not necessarily septic tank, but can be a communal leach field, or it could be one oversized tank. But when you get to a certain size, then it has to be reviewed by Department of Health Engineering, and that's what I'm comfortable with.
yeah.
I mean, I look at what's been done on, well, it's still under review, but the proposal under South High Street has gotten the preliminary acceptance. And then you have the Mountain Road one, and all of those pretty much tied, I'll say 4 units to that, to septic. I mean, the whole purpose of, the issue I have, Rolf, is the whole purpose of having central water and central sewer, as we call it, is to go down to 5,000 square feet. So to just be sharing among 2 just feels like it defeats the purpose of the standard, which is to give a huge density bonus. And it can result in some odd things, like we saw with that subdivision out in, if you use the word shared, like the subdivision north of, at the end of Waterford, near Waterford. I'd rather just make sure that, and we may not be doing this round, but go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Lopez, 438 Commons Drive. It may not allow you to get under 5,000 square feet, because the state is gonna, when you have multi-users on one lot, you need about 8,000 square feet of land per 2 bedrooms. So, you know, if you have a 2-acre lot, you're not gonna get down to 16 units. Because the state.
8,000 square feet is for the leaching field, correct?
Yes, that's the state voting maximum for leach fields. When you have multi-users on one lot, that's kind of what limited us on the South High Street application you referenced. We could have 10 bedrooms there on 80,000 square feet. So you do have kind of like a stop there as it is, just
Okay.
with the state.
I think we shouldn't do anything right now and have Kathy, if you can you flesh this? And this was just, my opinion anyway, is maybe have Kathy look at this multi-user
That's fine.
thing, and you know, what Mark just said is,
You know, as there's more development pressure, there'll be more pressure on this.
right. Okay. This other change, I guess legal will let us know about this, but So every subdivision reg I've looked at, the subdivision lot sizes match whatever it is in the district. And some of this is gonna change because of, for subdivisions in a growth area or where there's public water and public sewer. MMA has come back to us and told us it's very unusual, but their opinion is it's okay. So they're not saying we can't do it. I don't know what the Housing Opportunity Program's going to say. I'm guessing they're gonna say if you're in a growth area with public water and public sewer, you can't have a 1 acre lot, you have to have, you know.
I mean, that does make
It's
sense.
gonna be, or not with public water and sewer, just say with, you know, they're gonna, depending on where it is, it's gonna be dictated to be smaller. So, I think we don't need to do this now, but I think at some point, legal just needs to advise us. A background on this is, the background I know, some of you may have more history. So when we implemented the land use code, the zoning in 2019, legal started to change the subdivision regs to make the minimum lot size match the districts, including in the rural neighborhood, which would be 80,000 square feet. The board objected to that on the grounds that we thought it would discourage subdivisions and was overburdening, and it was important for zoning to pass. And changing, although, you know, it could have been changed just within subdivision, we said we don't want to do that. So that's the history of that. And it has stood, and it's probably been there for 20 years or more.
Yeah, as I recall, prior to the 80,000 square foot minimum lot size, you could, it was 40,000 square feet. You could break a lot off at 40,000 square feet, it was doubled to 80, but remained at 40 if you went through the subdivision process.
Right,
Okay.
right. So, I'm thinking as we go through the process with GPCOG and legal looks at the changes, if there's something that's not legal, they're gonna tell us. But, so I think that's it, unless somebody has other changes. Any comments?
I know that LD 1829 had some interesting language around septic, but I'm not sure if that was changed when they patched it with 723, so that's an area that I'll look at.
Yeah. The main thing that they changed, one of the main things that they changed is to go to the 5,000 square feet in a growth area, you have to have public water and public sewer. You can't have a comparable central system. That was the big change. Okay, so what I've got is the first revision, we're gonna change the division of a new or existing structure into 4 and have legal's gonna look at everything. We're gonna change the 15-foot perimeter buffer for, just call it regular subdividing, to 25. At this point, we are going to strike item A of preservation and natural historic features and evaluate, is there, can we bolster, can we make, first of all, can we come up with something that's clear? And second of all, bolster our intent around leaving trees and not clear cutting totally within. So that's a weight. We're going to add in V7, the change to allow one connection with an existing public road. And we're going to include revision 4, the lot area for mobile home parks and being net buildable land. And then we're going to include in cluster housing the change for the road, section V5N or V50. And then in common open space, the language to specify 20,000 square feet if you have 20,000 square feet of common open space. So I'd like to, so we can do this two ways if we want to try and have this go, sooner rather than later. Then we would vote tonight to adopt the language that we've agreed on. That would not include the clearing thing. It would be basically what I just said. And it would not do anything with central water, central sewer. So if we vote to include this language, then Ashley and I'll work to clean this up, send it to legal. Legal will look at it. And normally what we would ask is that they prepare a public hearing draft.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
so moved by Mr. Mattson, and seconded by Ms. Cook. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. And I think,
You'll take a motion to adjourn?
That's it.
does anybody else wish to speak?
Sorry, I'll go quick. It's late. Paul Skinner. First off, I'd like to thank you guys also for implementing some of the changes that some of the folks have suggested. I think it shows great working together and responsiveness, and I think they're good ideas. I just like to close out on the implementation of some of the new housing laws. And when I watched the last workshop, I know you were struggling. I think it was the inner corridor. I see you were struggling with the 4 for 5,000, and then maybe
Right.
just go 1250
Should we
after
or
that.
shouldn't we?
And I
Right.
thought about it. I'm like, we don't get any extra credit. Nobody gets any extra credit for exceeding. How about we just meet? So maybe just follow what's under the underlying district outside of the state law. I mean, if you start to look at some of the densities that you could be putting in some of these areas, I think they're pretty high. And so a lot, a 20,000 square foot lot could have
A lot.
20 units in it. And, with all this housing law hoopla, nobody talks about the size of the dwellings. I haven't seen it. Are they 2-bedroom? Are they 4-bedroom? How many families can live in them? It's all out of our control.
No one talks about the size. The other thing is, no one
Has
talks
to meet
about
the septic.
the effect on
Well, it's public water and public sewer.
public water, and schools.
In schools, right, in transportation, social services, but again, that's all out of our control. And, my opinions don't matter, the planning
Okay.
board frankly doesn't for what the state has done.
Well-
However, let me just
Go
finish,
ahead,
please.
sorry. I'm just trying to
They
understand.
left a couple of levers, they're small levers, they emptied your toolbox, but they left you a couple of small levers, and those levers are related to adequate public water and public sewer. Kathy, I think you brought it up. We gotta make sure the system has the pressure to meet the static head to push up to a 5th floor that's 50 feet high. So that's one lever. Does it have the capacity? Does the fire truck, can it reach 50 feet on a diagonal?
Right.
I don't know. So the state gave you a couple of small levers that maybe you can pull on to keep this thing under control, and back to the mitigation conversation with GP-COG. The other thing is the wastewater capability. So I assume when that was designed and approved to be built, it was given such a, that's going to last Bridgton 10 years, 5 years, I don't know, based on XYZ growth. It seems like that could be prorated back and really analyze to say, in this district, in this area, this is how much capacity we have. This is the runway we have over a 5 or 10 year period, and that translates back to how many bedrooms, how many units. So I think a lot of that stuff can be put forth from Public Works, gives you some data to help rein it in a little, so it doesn't get out of control. That's my comment
Yeah.
on the Maine housing.
Boy, I see Ashley. I don't disagree, I don't disagree with your
Character
comments.
appears in the
Just
comp
thinking
plan
how hard it would be to do
98
it.
times.
Yeah,
Community character, rural character, historic
Right.
character. You go down the line. A 50-foot rectangular box with 20 to 30 units, and it doesn't fit that.
I mean, don't we already have some of that?
don't we already
Yeah.
have what?
Some
Off
of that,
yeah,
but
not
that's-
really not visible from Main Street, so if you
I think
tear
it's
down.
very visible from.
I missed what we're talking about.
I was trying to look up, like, the density of, like, 20 unit, like, the Lakewood is that what it's called? The apartments. Like,
Oh, but
doesn't that
That's
fit
an
that
allowed use and
density?
went through the planning board.
They're, let me think about this, it would be allowed to be done, those are 5,000, okay, so that's a very large lot, and it's 5,000 square feet per, oh, no, they used site plan. So, I think, I'd have to look at that, but I think you'd be allowed even more than what's there. I know that, that was I gotta think about it. It was actually subdivision, because it's multiple buildings.
I don't know, I tried
So
Googling
it's
and it didn't show up
5,000
right away,
square
but
feet.
that feels like,
It's 5,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
but I think that's what we're getting from GPCOG is like the visual, because I think
Yeah.
that is what,
I mean, I tend to, I would like to keep it strictly to the state law while protecting the town's quarter. Because we do have the levers of buffers and design and
Yep.
those sorts of things. Like, one of the things brought up about design was in one of the smallest district, which is downtown business two, it's tiny, it's like 30 lots or something. In the space and bulk standards, just to require, no flat roofs, that you have to have for peak, because if you go down Lower Main Street where this is, these are old farmhouses that have been rehabbed
Right.
or
Victorian.
colonial, just really nice, homes that are, very, give you that New England character.
Yeah, so general
So,
comment,
the only-
anywhere you have any controls, what little they left you, I think it'd be great if you could
Yeah.
put something in place, now that we've outsourced the heavy lifting, which is great, because I think now, you can work with members of the community on improving the
Right.
code and
Right.
and implementing the comp plan, and
Yeah. I mean, one of the things GPCOG will look at is, so if we were to follow the minimum, like you said, after the first 4 units at 1,200 square feet each, it would go, it could go to whatever the lot size is for the district. Of course, writing that into the code will make it a little bit more complicated too, right? Because there's going to be an if, but again, all the formatting and all that is to be figured out, so who knows? Me personally, as one board member, tend to agree that these need to pass come July, so we need to do it carefully, because if it doesn't pass next June, we're gonna have a lot of legal snafus, I think.
that's the other way out, just don't do it. I have 5 or 6.
Thank you very much.
It's too late, I'm not going to do it to you. I have 5 or 6 things that I think are really significant, similar to what Mr. Lopez worked on with you folks for the cluster housing. I'm not going to go through them now, it's too late. But I do want to revisit them now that this other thing's outsourced. There's a lot of things here I think that could have a significant impact to low-scale infill housing outside of the growth area and the areas with water and sewer. Because as we may or may not agree, the housing shortage isn't just apartments and condos. It's single-family homes, like this gentleman's trying everything which way to Sunday to come up with a solution that works. and it's not high-end second homes, but it takes a whole of community, because the 17 condos, if they didn't get built, that'd be 17 single-family homes that get bought by somebody else, most likely second home buyers. So I think it affects every ladder of the housing stock, and I think we really need to address all of it. And so I've got 4 or 5 things here that I think that could make a huge difference.
Can you give us a quick rundown and then just
The
write that up
quick
and
one
send
is
it?
LD, I just had it off my head, LD 1396, it just never made it out of committee. That was going to do when she said, that was going to do 5 dwellings on a lot without a sub D, and 5 lots if one of them were 40 acres, so you could do 4 of them. Sadly, that never made it to vote, but that could come back. And so why wouldn't we just be ahead of that? Why couldn't we come up with like a fast track 4? A 4-lot subdivision that goes through the planning board, but the requirements are way less. And so it's basically a mini cluster housing. And whether it's a shared driveway or it's an actual 60-foot right-of-way built to road standards that could be extended through the end of it in time, a big risk for developers is building the road, putting in the infrastructure. And then if the market turns and you're sitting on 20 or 30 lots and they're taxed at the regular tax rate, you're done, you're buried. So that's a big problem. I mean, the 4-letter dirty word is what is a road to Mr. Lopez here.
You can certainly take a look at that. How about follow up with a written one, but just so the board can hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, road design.
We won't have it
I
in
think
these changes, but.
Road design relief, if it's really good ground inspected by the Public Works Director, there's no reason you need to have 2 feet of gravel or 20 inches plus 4-inch topping. I don't think there's a town road in town that has that kind of material. Sometimes when you grub out a road, it's the best material you can imagine. You could probably get away with 6 inches of material, so. It'd be nice if there was some relief there, so you're not looking at $1 million a mile. Maybe it's, half of that or 2/3 of that.
Okay.
So, and it'd be subject to the Public Works and Fire.
I don't understand why, when we build roads and subdivisions, if the roads aren't accepted by the town.
Well, I think that's a good point, because that was my other thing, is if you do want to build, if you do build it to road standards and it's inspected, why shouldn't there be an option if the association votes to have the town accept it?
I think they should accept it.
I mean, this is where sprawl is more costly in the long term to municipalities, like 10, like a lot.
The tax bill's not low. I mean, the association has to maintain the road. I mean, we had that not development until
This is what
year after
density
year,
matters.
so they were able to stack the town meeting. They finally got it.
They didn't stack the town meeting, Leo Blair did it.
Well,
I was at that town meeting.
Okay, so we'll save that for another time. I think that's like a no-go with the select board, bottom line.
Because they're,
But we can, anyway,
And the
next one.
backlots. I thought Brenda was working on a backlot ordinance. I provided some language to her, one that I had bumped into 15 years ago when I subdivided my home property. Right now, I don't think we have a backlot ordinance, right? So be able to use a shared driveway and have a backlot. So I think that's hugely important. And as far as I'm concerned, that should factor into that's a variant of the fast track 4, where you can do a 4-lot subdivision with a shared driveway or / shared road. And maybe it's more of a road when it's 4 and more of a driveway when it's 2. And as far as urban sprawl, well then, then we can put in some of the goodies that are in the cluster housing for, what you call them, the protected conserved lands.
The open space.
Yeah, the open space.
Okay.
So they don't have to be 2-acre lots. Land not suitable for development, my favorite one. I just don't think that's going to go away as it relates to the 25% slope. I think that's a huge deal, mostly from an economic development perspective for the town moving forward.
The 25% slope.
I just think it's going to be huge. And as you look to map in the new comp plan and the new districts that are there, I'm sorry.
No worries.
It's late. When you go to look in the new map, the new districts that are laid out in the comp plan, particularly the rural village, majority of that land is already fully deployed. It's already at its highest best use. There's a storage facility, the 17 condos, another one soaking wet, and then the rest majority is 25%. So
Well, it'd be interesting to have that data if you have it.
I have it.
I mean, it is
I
something
hired
we
Sebago
would.
Technics, and I have, I wasn't, not the appropriate meeting to do it, but I'm prepared to show what
Yeah.
that terrain looks like and what it means.
Okay.
And then the 40-acre exemption is my favorite. That used to be in here, so you guys, folks all know what the subdivision law is. You can break it in half every 5 years, but you can actually break 2 off every 5 years and keep 40. Keep one that's 40 and not called a lot. And Bridgton got rid of that. I didn't have a chance to look, but I think 21 or 22.
We got rid of it, so it follows state law.
When did we get
No,
rid
no,
of that?
no. State law is 40 acres does not, my
Doesn't
understanding.
get an exemption.
It doesn't count a lot. 40 acres is not a lot. So therefore, if you break off 2, 40 acres is not considered a lot.
And what year was that enacted?
No idea. I just
I'll
know
look, but I
that.
think it's 21 or
But
22.
we can take a look at that.
Just curious.
So, I mean, I think you have a lot of landowners in town, older landowners that have been here, we're not talking 20 years, talking 50 or 100, 150 years, that, die land rich and cash poor, and they never had an opportunity to break off a lot or two along the way. And I think this is a way to free up lots without forcing them to become a developer and do a giant 50-lot subdivision.
Okay.
And just like me, I own, 6 or 8 woodlots, and I'm not saying I'm going to go out tomorrow and do 2 and 5, but I'd sort of like to have the opportunity to
But
do it.
weren't you before us recently because you couldn't do anything with your?
That had to do with the slope, the 25%
Oh, I
slope.
can do 2 and 5.
Yeah,
No
but
problem.
I remember you.
Yeah, and I have, 5 other lots that I can do it, and not all that 110 acres has got the problem. There's problems in the definitions and figuring out how to define
Right.
25% when your
Right.
land
Yeah.
does this. And to that
Anymore.
point, I could put a hotel on it.
Yeah.
I could put a hotel
But
on the
not a house,
25,
right?
on the 25%, but I can't subdivide
You
it.
can't subdivide it.
That's right, that's what.
So I could put a hotel and I could put a huge cut in it, make a huge parking lot, put a hotel, but I can't subdivide it with some homes with really nice buffering. And forget condos for the ski area, so.
Okay, is that the
There might be
list?
1 or 2 small ones, but those are the
Could you,
big ones.
yeah, would you, even if it's
Yeah, I
your
would.
handwritten copy, could you send that to us, please?
Be happy to.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. I appreciate the fact that you've thought about these things and come up with things. Same for you, Mark.
We like the participation from the community.
Yep, we're getting there. Okay, we did have a motion on the table to adjourn, but we didn't vote.
No worries.
So, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, off we go.